God for a minute, which I know isn't really done a lot during UU services, but just bear with me here. So, has anyone ever heard that phrase, God is love? How many of y'all have heard that before? Yeah, a lot of us. Okay. So, what is love though? It sounds nice, God is love, but not if you're not really sure what love is. Sarah gave a pretty nice list during the Time for All Ages. Love is throwing a handful of wildflower seeds in a ditch. Love is your dog or cat or horse or cow or salamander or snake. Love means different things to different people. And we use that word love a lot. As Unitarian Universalists, we have this whole national justice campaign that we called Side with Love. And as a part of the conversation about the bylaws revision for the denomination, we're talking about potentially replacing the 7 principles with a set of shared values instead, with love at the center. I have a Unitarian Coastal Fellowship tote bag. I should have brought it as a prop that has the chalice logo on one side, that logo up there, and on the other, the phrase, love is love. Love is the most popular word in song titles. All You Need Is Love by the Beatles, right? Valentine's Day was just last week, a day dedicated to love. We love love. We're always looking for love, talking about love, singing about love. But what is love? I'm going to go down a rabbit hole here for a minute. Bear with me. So the ancient Greeks had multiple words for love, ranging from eros, passionate love, to agape, pure love, to storge, familial love, like love for parents have for their children. The Chinese philosopher Confucius talked about ren, which encompasses how people should behave one another, the duties that parents have toward their children and children have toward their parents. Meanwhile, the Chinese philosopher Mozi championed the concept of I, a universal love that should be felt by all people toward all other people. There are also multiple Sanskrit words that refer to love, ranging from priya, innocent love, to kama, sexual desire. Did you know that the idea of marrying for love is actually a very new concept? Only came about in the last couple hundred years. Prior to that, love was actually seen as potentially dangerous to the institution of marriage. Because for much of human history, love was seen as a kind of, well, a temporary insanity. I mean, I can see it, honestly. Like, I get that. I get that. Love is a temporary insanity. People do crazy things for love. I mean, how many movies are there where people are, running through airports, holding up a boombox in the rain, doing these dangerous stunts? And that's why it was dangerous to the idea of marriage, because marriage is supposed to be a stabilizing force. This was according to how people thought of marriage back then. It was about uniting two families together, forming alliances, giving birth to the next generation, raising the children together. It wasn't about love. That's crazy. Benjamin Franklin, yeah, that Benjamin Franklin, founding father, guy who's on the $100 bill, he wrote in one of his letters, love considered merely a passion. That's my Ben Franklin impression. Love, considered merely a passion, will naturally have but a short duration. Like all other passions, 'tis changeable, transient, and accidental. So it wasn't something that was considered a practical foundation for marriage because love is this temporary insanity. It comes and goes. It wasn't until the Enlightenment, actually, and the Industrial Revolution together that the idea of marrying for love came about, because the Enlightenment promoted the idea that humans are supposed to pursue happiness, while the Industrial Revolution gave rise to a middle class, people who were able to make their own money, and then they could say, I'll marry whoever I want, because they didn't have to worry about their parents paying the dowry. But not everywhere. There are still many cultures today in which arranged marriages are the norm, or where you're just supposed to be practical about choosing a spouse. Like, do they own a house? Like, how much money do they make? So the reason I know all this, and thank you for going on this rabbit hole with me, is because I went on this quest to define love back years ago. I was in seminary, learning how to be a minister. And I was like, if I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to siding with love and loving people and talking about love and building loving communities, talking about loving the hell out of the world, seems like I ought to know what love is. That's how I came to learn all this history. Went, read a lot of books, did a lot of research. I read a lot of Bell Hooks. May she rest in power. She passed away late last year. Bell Hooks was a Black feminist and activist who wrote a book called All About Love. Yeah, that's it up there. I think I read an older edition. The cover looked different. Wherein she defines love as a choice. She wrote, "We choose to love. And when we understand love as the will to nurture our own and one another's spiritual growth, it becomes clear we cannot claim to love if we are hurtful and abusive. Love and abuse cannot coexist." Therefore, she goes on to say, there can be no love without justice. There's also a Cornel West quote where he says, "Justice is what love looks like in public." Bell Hooks wrote, "Abuse and neglect negate love. Care and affirmation, the opposite of abuse and humiliation, are the foundation of love." So now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting to why our national justice campaign is called Side with Love. To side with love is to side with justice, care, and affirmation. It's to side against abuse, neglect, and humiliation. And so when we ask ourselves, what does love call us to do in this moment? We are asking ourselves, how do I side with care? What does it mean to side with affirmation? When love calls us, it calls us to build people up, not to tear people down. Bell Hooks also wrote that love is an action, never simply a feeling, which makes sense because how are any of us supposed to know what love is if we don't experience it? And that's how we learn what love is, by people demonstrating love for us and teaching us, therefore, how to show love for others. A very common thing in Asian families. Now, Asian families generally do not tell each other, "I love you." It's just not a thing. What is really common is a plate of cut fruit. That's a really common way of making up after arguments. You've had a fight, you go off to your separate rooms to cool off or what have you. And then later somebody knocks on your door and says, I peeled some oranges for you. You go ahead and eat those. I peeled them for you, or I cut up some apple slices. Here you go. And that's how they're saying, "I'm sorry. I love you." That's what. And so to this day, I cut fruit for people I care about. I just say, "Hey, here's a bowl of strawberries. I cut them up for you." And if you don't know what that means, you're just like, "Cool, strawberries." But this is how we learn, these different, they call them love languages now, of gift giving, acts of service, physical affection, words of affirmation. So we hug our dogs, we tell each other, "I love you," we buy each other presents. I knew someone whose parents, when they came to visit, they would clean his bathroom. Now that's love. Cleaning somebody's bathroom for them, that's love. But it's not just acts that we perform for each other that are how we demonstrate love. We demonstrate our love for the earth too, right? By picking up trash, by eating less or no meat, by using less electricity. Remember, abuse and neglect negate love. And so when we abuse and neglect the earth, we are not showing our love for creation, right? And all of this goes for ourselves too. When was the last time you gave yourself a present or, performed an act of service for yourself or told yourself, I love you? How many of us forget to love ourselves, right? And it's hard, when you put it all together like this, all this care and affirmation, showing people, telling people that we love them, loving ourselves, loving the earth, building other people up, building yourself up. Oh, that's a lot of work. That's like a full-time job in and of itself. And I mean, nobody's perfect. How can any of us be perfectly loving all the time? So, what I think is the most important quality of love, what we all need in order to let love into our lives? And this is from me, okay? This isn't from bell hooks. Maybe I'll write a book someday. I think it's humility. Because after reading all those books, doing all that research, I realized that I still didn't know what love was. I mean, I like Bell Hooks's definition about the will to nurture yourself and others in their spiritual growth. But I don't know if that's one size fits all. I don't know that it applies to how Asian cultures view love, and I don't think it's supposed to. What I learned from all that research is that how we define love is always changing, has always been changing, that maybe love itself is something that is changing, that has been changing. We don't see love as temporary insanity anymore. I mean, we kind of do. I heard you all laugh when I brought that up. But now we also see it as one of the most important and steadfast things. Something you build a marriage on, something you build a church on, something you build entire religions on, something strong enough and steadfast enough to outlast even death itself. Something we need more of in the world. That's love. That's the love we talk about today. So I think the most important quality of love, or just something that we all need in order to let love enter our lives, is humility. It's the ability to say, I don't know. It's the ability to say, maybe I was wrong. Maybe something needs to change. Maybe I need to change. In our current 7 principles, we don't ever once use the word love. And now we're proposing a radical change to the principles, replacing them with a set of shared values with love at the center. That's just a draft. I'm sure they'll come up with a much nicer looking graphic later. But I like to look at this graphic and think of those values on the outside as being modifiers for love in the center. Generous love, evolving love, just love, pluralistic love, all the different kinds of love that we can center in our lives. But we can't center love without humility. And we can't center love without action. Love without action is just a warm, fuzzy feeling, It's nice. But does it result in anything? And love without humility is, well, I'm not sure what that is. Ego, maybe. Narcissism. And so maybe that's part of what it means to side with love too, is to be open to change and growth. It's to be humble. It's to side with care and affirmation. And it's to work for justice for all so that all can love, so that all can experience love, so that we love all of that abuse and neglect and humiliation right out of this world and replace it with nothing but care and affirmation. What would the world be like if we could do that? If we did do that? What would the world be like if love were really at the center of everything we did all the time? I'm going to invite us to take a moment to just imagine that. Just take a few seconds to try to picture what the world would be like with love at the center. Was it amazing? Did you picture something amazing? Something wonderful? A world centered around love, lives centered around love? Wouldn't that be amazing? A world that looks just like Mr. Rogers' neighborhood? That's what I pictured. And we're working to do that, right here at the Unitarian Coastal Fellowship. We're trying to build a little world right here in this congregation that's centered around love. I'm getting a little emotional kind of thinking about it. And one of the many ways that this congregation works to center love, one of the many, I assure you, so many ways this congregation is working to center love, to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, has been in renewing its work as a welcoming congregation. The Welcoming Congregation Renewal Team has worked very hard over the past year to fulfill all of the requirements, well, not by themselves, to make sure the congregation fulfilled all of the requirements to renew our status as a welcoming congregation. And so I welcome Amy Jones to tell us about how that's been going.
On behalf of the Welcoming Congregation team, I am thrilled to announce that we received notification from Reverend Michael Crumpler, UUA LGBTQ and Multicultural Programs Director, that UCF has successfully completed the 5 practices of welcome renewal for 2022. Got a nice certificate in the mail and by email, and we've got it printed and are going to have it framed. Reverend Crumpler sends his sincere congratulations to UCF for our ongoing commitment to LGBTQ plus welcome and inclusion in and beyond Morehead City. He also said it was a pleasure to read about all that we have accomplished and the powerful work we have done to ensure that UCF is meeting the needs of queer and trans congregants in the wider community. He acknowledged the welcoming worship services, our days of observance, religious education, and projects that we have conducted over the past year. And he closed his letter by saying, quote, "Thanks again for your congregation's life-giving essential work," end quote. And I'll close with a quote from Laverne Cox, American actress and LGBTQ advocate. "When you put love out in the world, it travels, and it can touch people and reach people in ways that we never even expected," end quote. The Welcoming Congregation thanks you, UCF members and friends, for putting love out in the world and for your unwavering commitment to always side with love.